Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I like to discuss George Eustice, one of the genuine long-standing Brexiteers of Boris Johnson's government, who says that we need more immigration because some sectors are unable to find workers and it is harming our economy. And I'm also going to discuss what his proposal is. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel. So George Eustice is at it again. After stepping down from the cabinet, pretty much the first thing he did was to attack our main post-Brexit trade deals as being useless, harmful even. Now he's attacking our post-Brexit immigration policy. It's almost like he's saying Brexit would be brilliant if it weren't for all these Brexit policies we've got. He says that our immigration policy allows a lot of skilled workers to come into the country very easily, even for roles where we have no shortages, but prevents us recruiting for sectors like the food industry, which has acute labour shortages. And he's sort of right. Eustice is wrong to say it's easy to get skilled workers in. The Brexit immigration system allows relatively easy access to foreign workers for well-paid jobs. The points system targets salary. How much you're going to get paid. Now, to Eustice, or to indeed a Tory in general, the higher the pay, the more skilled the work. That's how they think. But it's not. There are skilled jobs, clearly skilled jobs, which are poorly paid, and so visas are more difficult because they fall below the threshold. You're reliant on the shortage occupation list to get these workers from abroad. Nurses, classic example. But he is right that the system makes it easy for certain employers to hire foreign workers, if they're going to offer a high salary, and others will struggle if it's going to be a salary that's below that threshold. I've said as much myself quite a lot of the time. It is an immigration system that allows people to hire foreign workers for well-paid jobs and forces British workers, therefore, into the lower paid jobs because it's very difficult to get migrant labour for that. Eustice cites the food industry particularly, but he ought to have also said hospitality and the care sector all need a steady supply of low-paid foreign labour, some of it seasonal. None of them are finding British workers to take up these roles. Farmers continue to say that they're not getting any British applicants at all for their seasonal work. They either hire from abroad or their crops don't get harvested. It's that simple. So we have an ardent Brexiteer. George Eustice is a Brexiteer going way back, who is now saying that we need to be freer with our immigration policy. Though I did have to laugh when he tried to blame our current immigration policy on Remainers. Yeah, that's right. Our incredibly harsh and self-defeating immigration policy is the fault of Remainers. Specifically, he blames Theresa May, who did not manage our exit from the EU, I remind you, for implementing what he described as a Remainers interpretation of what Brexit was about. This is, of course, a complete nonsense, and he actually contradicted himself at any rate. When it was put to him that the labour shortages are being caused by Brexit, he said, no, it's a mistake to see everything through the prism of Brexit. He said that this wasn't Brexit, but the failure of post-Brexit immigration policy. And I can sort of go halfway with him on this one. See, we didn't have to have the particular immigration policy that we do as a result of Brexit, technically. That is true. However, this self-defeating immigration policy would have been absolutely impossible as an EU member, because it's really this simple. If a harmful thing could not have happened without Brexit, then even if it wasn't inevitable, it's still Brexit. Like if I fire a loaded pistol at a duck, I'm no marksman, so I'm quite likely to miss it. But if I did hit it, it is because I'm firing a loaded pistol at a duck. The Brexit campaign featured anti-immigration rhetoric by all the main groups very heavily. Not one single pro-leave group talked about the sort of immigration policy that Eustice feels we should be going with. On the contrary, they not only talked about lower levels of immigration, in some cases none at all, but they were specifically calling out industries such as the food sector for using migrant workers. But going back to Eustice's inconsistencies, he says that our immigration policy is not a feature of Brexit, but at the same time blames Theresa May for it. Well, they can't both be true. In fact, neither is. Theresa May did not decide the terms of our exit. Yes, she worked. A lot of the withdrawal agreement was done while Theresa May was Prime Minister. Boris Johnson changed some bits. But nonetheless, she didn't decide the terms of our exit. She was a backbencher at the time. But if our post-Brexit immigration policy is separate to Brexit itself, which Eustice says it is, then May certainly had nothing to do with it. Priti Patel was sorting that one. She prepared none of the groundwork under Theresa May's direction because Theresa May sacked her from her government for basically betraying the country. And she wasn't Home Secretary at the time anyway. So even when you get a Brexiteer being willing to identify some problems with Brexit and advocating what appears to be a practical solution, something Eustice is only doing now because his political career is over and presumably his next career is not going to be helped by being blinkered, he still can't help but blame Remainers for the mess we find ourselves in. But then it's worth considering, so what does Eustice think the solution is? Because it's one of those things which sounds nice, and you can't rule it out. There is a bit of a flaw in the thinking, but it might have legs. So, which is quite common when considering Brexiteers' ideas. Eustice is not advocating full freedom of movement, more a sort of reciprocal selective freedom of movement, something that Labour have been proposing for a couple of years. Now, I have to say, I don't mind this. People will say, well, hang on, this is cherry picking. And it sort of is and sort of isn't. I think people need to understand what is the difference between cherry picking and a bilateral agreement. People think, oh, if you just want to negotiate a deal on this small area, then that's cherry picking. No, that's not cherry picking. Cherry picking is when you say, we want to agree this, and we'll absolutely be reciprocal about it, but it's something that the EU goes, yeah, but we don't really value that. I tell you what, if we give you this, you must give us this. And we go, no. That's cherry picking. Whereas if we say to the EU, look, we would like this, and they go, okay, well, we're prepared to do that. But in return, what we really want from you is this. And we go, yeah, good deal. That's a bilateral agreement. But the political situation is really quite simple if you think about it. So right now, full freedom of movement is not a political win in the UK yet. It's not the Conservatives and Labour both being particularly blinkered over it. It's not a political winner. But selective freedom of movement is. You can absolutely go. In fact, Labour have been pushing that for a couple of years now. Absolutely fine. They know that that is not a vote loser. And that is because when you ask people that are anti-immigration, you say to them, they say they have no problems with immigration. It's this bogus concept of uncontrolled immigration. Oh, we're totally fine with controlled immigration. In reality, it was always controlled. But that's what they'll say. It's, oh, we're fine with controlled immigration. We just want it controlled. Okay, let's go with it then. If the freedom of movement is selective, it can't be uncontrolled, can it? By definition. Now, Labour's plan is for performers, which doesn't step on any gammon toes. Eustice's idea is for reciprocal of freedom of movement, specifically for, well, he says for UK and EU citizens under the age of 35 for a 2-year period. So he has got a very specific purpose in mind, which is edging into cherry-picking territory. He wants to pursue bilateral talks with individual countries where we traditionally get a lot of our seasonal labour for farms, because Eustice comes from a farming background. That's all he really cares about. And we can say, yes, this is the absolute epitome of cherry picking, isn't it? Oh, we'd like a bilateral agreement with, not with France, not with Spain, with Bulgaria and other countries where we traditionally get a lot of our migrant seasonal farm workers from. And absolutely. But a selective form of freedom of movement designed to help out the industry he cares about and still blocking off other important forms of immigration. He's still a Brexiteer at the end of the day. But before I go on to whether the EU might go for something like this, let's just pretend it were possible. Let's first of all look at the political advantages. So let's pretend that this selective form of freedom of movement could be achieved. Not strictly along the lines Eustice is proposing, because that is entirely UK-centric, but the EU were to go, well, okay, we'll do this other thing as well and we'll go for it. Or the individual countries would. It would have public support, because people can see that labour shortages are harming the economy. There's no real argument about that. There's no argument that these people are taking our jobs, because no bugger's doing those jobs right now. It's all right, swallow Braverman saying, oh no, we should just be able to trade our own workers, right? Some of these workers are like, some of these jobs are unskilled work. You go in and you spend like an hour watching someone else do it and then do it. What training, really? No, we don't have people going for these jobs. There aren't enough people. We need to get from overseas. But once we get people used to selective freedom of movement, so once we implement some of it and people are fine with it, because they're fine with it now, and it's like, oh, well, it's only for these sectors where we can't get workers. They get that. That's fine. It then becomes easier to propose a little bit more, because you're already fine with the idea of selective freedom of movement. So no one said it had to be this much, so a little bit more. In the interest of boosting the economy, of course. Always in the interest of boosting the economy. Then a bit more. I think it would be quicker and easier to transition to support for full freedom of movement between ourselves and the EU if we do so in stages. And remember, freedom of movement is the only sticking point when it comes to, can we then rejoin the single market? We know that there's no legal mechanism to rejoin the single market, but there could be. That is the main sticking point politically in this country, freedom of movement. Once we get rid of that argument, there's no argument for not joining the single market, other than the EU saying, well, hang on a minute, it's not that simple. Much easier to do it incrementally than to go from nothing to everything. So then we ask, okay, so now how realistic is this? Would the EU go for it? Well, as I said, in terms of the initial proposal, I mean, I can't say no, but I doubt it. Can't rule it out. I don't know what Bulgaria would think about it, for example, because this isn't about the whole of the EU. The proposal is clearly one that is in the UK's specific interest. If it happens to align with, say, Bulgaria's interest, great. If not, well, we're going to have to change the deal a little. But that's fine, because that's how you start negotiations. Each side says, well, we want this. The other side says, well, we want this. And then what you do is you find some acceptable middle ground through negotiation. So although it's easy to dismiss Eustice's plan as being very UK, we'll never get it, so what's the point? Well, no, we will never get it, but that's a starting position. And the EU countries taking part, if they can see some mutual benefit by expanding it a little bit, there may be scope for them to say, well, if we just adjust the terms like this, then yes, I think we've got an agreement. So I'm not minded to be dismissive. I certainly wouldn't suggest, in fact, there's nothing I would say don't bother to even negotiate, because if anything can move us closer to the EU, all to the good. Because any move which brings us close to the EU, whether the EU entire or, as in this case, individual members with bilateral agreements, brings us closer to rejoining the EU. And for the avoidance of doubt, individual EU member states are allowed to form bilateral immigration deals with third countries, because they're independent sovereign states. And this might allow the government of the day, which will of course be Labour now, because I don't see Sunak going for this in the next year while Braverman's there. It will allow the government of the day to be able to emphasise the lever of control over immigration to the public that the policy presents. You can't say this is uncontrolled. Of course it's not uncontrolled. It's selective. It only applies to these things in order to help these sectors of our economy. Then if we get agreement a couple of years later, we can show economic data proving the worth of the scheme. And it's also say, oh, yeah, it's working really well. We could boost the economy a little bit more. Do you fancy more money, public? Do you fancy... Oh, yeah, we fancy more money. Well, we could expand it a little bit more. Brexit is a debate which is so polarised that, there is an argument for trying incremental steps, which neither side can really oppose. Obviously, the Remain side or Rejoin side now is not going to oppose more freedom of movement, even if it's not universal. But neither the other side, because it's controlled immigration. And that is better, as I say, than trying to go from nothing to everything. Do it bit by bit, bit by bit. And it's not like we can do it all in one go anyway, either politically or legally. Finally, as I'm reflecting on an article for this video where the interview was reported on, I may as well comment on the obligatory government statement at the end, which of course, as always seems to happen, went completely without comment. There should always be a critical comment of a government statement at the end of an article. Never leave the government with the last word. But they said that the current immigration system takes account of the labour market via the shortage occupation list. Now, it's really very simple. We have an acute labour shortage in multiple sectors of our economy. As I say, the food sector, hospitality and the care sector come up time and again. The shortage occupation list is provably therefore not working, because if it were, our economy would not be being held back due to a lack of labour. In fact, last year, I don't know whether it's still the case, the Bank of England was saying that the number one issue they get from businesses, so it's not just the Bank of England saying this, via businesses saying their number one issue was lack of workers. So therefore, the shortage occupation list is not working. QED, which is Latin for mic drop. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.